G'day, Professor Joseph Drew here. I'm here today to talk to you about a recent publication on the principle of subsidiarity and COVID-19. It's just been accepted at Australia's premier political studies journal, which is the Australian Journal of Political Science. This is a new type of segment that I'm introducing to the channel where I introduce new research, give you extra information. If you are interested in the research and getting a copy of it, you'll be able to either purchase a copy from AJPS or contact me directly if you're a scholar through ResearchGate. So this is a copy of the proof. For those of you who are not academics, prior to actually being published online or in paper, a proof is sent to the authors, you get a last check, you make sure there's no spelling mistakes and the grammar and punctuation is all in order. But this is essentially what the paper will look like. And at the front here is the abstract, which tells you what it's all about. And as I said, it's Australia's highest ranked journal of political science. The main thesis of the paper is that the existing public policy evaluative frameworks are deficient. The most common framework used looks at things through three discrete lenses. It uses a programmatic lens, which looks at facts and figures. Did the policy achieve what it set out to achieve? It uses a political lens, which looks at whether political casualties emanated from the public policy or not. It looks at the process lens, how the public servants went about getting it from a mere idea to something that was actually in effect. What it doesn't look at is a moral lens. Now, this is incredibly important for at least two reasons. First, the sole source of justification and legitimacy for government is as a moral endeavour. It's purely there to foster the common good and protect the common good, and by doing so allow people to flourish. I have a video on my channel if you want to look into this in more detail. That's one reason. The second reason is if we don't have a moral lens, we're going to end up perversely celebrating successes for horrendous things, such as the Holocaust, for instance. You know, from a programmatic perspective, it did what it set out to achieve. It killed millions of people. From a political perspective, until the end of the war, most Germans were unaware of it. It didn't claim any political casualties. From a process perspective, if you can use the word efficient, it was extremely efficiently done. But from a moral perspective, it was the darkest days and the worst example of man that we have ever witnessed in our history. And yet, without this moral lens, we'd have to declare that it was a public policy success. So clearly we must have a moral lens. Now, the principle of subsidiarity was actually developed in the papal encyclicals. It looks at trying to get a balance between two key concepts in natural law. The first is human dignity, your right to pursue your existential ends, be all that you can be, without undue interference. And it tries to balance this up against the task of the government, which is a common good, and that's a help accruing to people as a result of their cooperation. People are social animals. We do need to cooperate to achieve our ends, but there must be a balance. If we go too far towards the common good, we'll make the mistake that many communist countries made and the National Socialists, the Nazis, made. And we will diminish or erode or trample human dignity entirely, and that's when it leads us into terrible, terrible outcomes. Now, to ensure that that balance is maintained, there's two obligations put on government. One is to never subsume the legitimate functions of people or their lesser, smaller associations. The other is for government to provide help when there is bona fide need. Now, the paper goes through looking at the responses of 10 different nations. And what I find is that there were some nations that had subsidiarity-like responses, where human dignity was preserved, and also where the common good was furthered. And this is the interesting thing. You could actually achieve each. Now, notably, Sweden, everyone knows about that. They didn't have an enforced lockdown. But Japan, despite the state of emergencies, the lockdowns in the Japanese context are more like an official, strongly worded recommendation to stay near home if you can. But there was no problem if you needed to go out. I have colleagues in Japan, I have students in Japan, I know they were able to go out and function as per normal, although they tried very hard not to do so. And Korea, which also has had very disruptive interventions, but not interventions that have totally eliminated human dignity like some of the interventions done in other countries. I should state at this point that the analysis was based on data obtained from the World Health Organization, the International Monetary Fund, and the Global State of Democracy Initiative, which is a collaboration amongst several reputable observers. And what's interesting here is that the responses that threatened human dignity most were from countries such as Australia and the United Kingdom, which people wouldn't ordinarily associate with that sort of thing. And in fact, what we find is that Australia and China were very similar in their neglect of natural law precepts. And it's very unusual for these two countries to want to align themselves on any matter, but it seems that they have aligned themselves over the last 2 years or so on the erosion of human dignity. So what I conclude from this paper is that a moral lens is absolutely necessary. Without it, we're going to celebrate public policy successes that have resulted in huge threats to human dignity. And certainly from my perspective as a natural law philosopher, I don't consider anything a success if it's had such a large cost on human dignity. The principle of subsidiarity, as I've shown, is ideally situated to do an evaluation of public policy from a moral perspective, mainly because it puts front and center the two things that come into conflict as soon as government gets involved, and that's human dignity on the one hand and the common good on the other. Now, if you found this video helpful and you want to see more of these sorts of videos, please subscribe, please thumbs up, it all helps, and please consider disseminating this video. The whole point of this channel, it takes quite a bit of time, is to get knowledge out there in the public sphere so more people can make better decisions and have access to better resources. And any help you can provide me with on that front is greatly appreciated. Thank you very much for your time. Goodbye.